Hello, everyone. Hope you can see and hear as well. We can see people join very quickly with lots of participants joining our Cambridge October conference. Welcome to our traditional event. My name is Darina Sujuk. I'm a Senior Business Development Manager for Cambridge Assessment English. This conference is also organized jointly with Cambridge University Press and the Linguist Company, and I'm very pleased to present you our honorable presenters and lecturers. Olha Madilus, Herbert Puchta, we will have Paul joining us lately, and my lovely colleague, Tatiana Shalepko.
Hello, everyone. That's me, Tatiana Shalepko, Cambridge University Press CLT consultant for the Linguist Company in Ukraine. I'm happy to be here with you. I still hope for 2 years now, I still hope that we will meet offline soon, but looks like these meetings are still some rooms for warm sharing of knowledge and motivation for teachers, for teacher managers and educational managers, and all of you who are joining us today. And I will start from some Cambridge updates for primary teachers, because our first part is about teaching young learners. With Dasha, Darina Sujuk, we prepared some news from Cambridge University Press and Cambridge Assessment English. So about Cambridge University Press, there are still teachers who are now teaching in the 4th grade and working with Quick Minds for Ukraine. And I would like to remind that they received student books, and they still have a possibility to work with activity books. If you don't have these books, you still can find them on our Linguist UI website. And Darina will tell you more about what's new about these particular activity books for grade 4, which are unique and special this year. You are still provided with all the materials, like teacher's book, which is online and still available in print, and you can find all the audio materials and all the worksheets on the Linguist UI website. We also provide teachers with additional components. These are puzzles, super puzzles books, super portfolio books, super dictionary and reading books that will develop the skills accordingly, to their titles. And teachers' resource books, flashcards and posters are again available, so you are welcome to use all the range of components with Quick Minds for Ukraine. We support teachers not only with materials, with print materials and books, but also we have video lessons which you can find online, and you can find quick notes that will help you make your lessons more interactive. You can work with our methodological articles that you can find on the Linguist UI website. And every month we hold webinars for teachers, both young learners and secondary students, those who teach young learners and secondary students. So follow our news on Facebook and sign up for these events. We also provide all the teachers that work with Quick Minds for Ukraine with unique worksheets that were developed together with experts from Cambridge University Press and from the Linguist Publishing House, we collected all the feedback from the teachers who used to work with Quick Minds for 4 years now, and those who say what they need to make their learning process better. So they told us that they need more reading and grammar, and that's where you can find them. These are worksheets for developing reading and grammar skills for your young learners in the new Ukrainian school. And also we've got this wonderful 6-level course, Fun Skills, that develops skills not only with Quick Minds, but with all other materials, whatever you are using. If you're going to either pass young learners exams, and Dasha will tell you more about those, or if you are going to just have fun at your lessons with your kids, look through Fun Skills, because this is the most fun course I've ever seen, and when I saw it, I was like, okay. Now I would like to go to grade 1 and work with all of these levels, because they consist of fun parts, and they consist of thinking development parts, and also exam skills preparation, exam skills development. That's it from me, and giving the floor to my colleague Darina Sijuk, who will tell you more about assessment, Cambridge assessment in Ukraine.
Thank you, Tanya. So we will concentrate at this part of our conference about updates from primary. We're proud that we are designing assessment tools for every learner, every step of the way. And honestly, I can say that assessment for young learners is my personal favorite, because seeing the kids reaching their first heights and getting their first international certificates is the most pleasant part of my job. So we will be talking about assessment for young learners and assessment for Ukrainian primary school. And as you know, with the new Ukrainian school reform, assessment for international assessment became closer, because the new Ukrainian school reform in the foreign language section is based purely on the Common European Framework of Reference, and this is where international language qualifications are very well aligned. And we are very proud to say that we're working closely with the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine on helping them develop best assessment tools in Ukrainian schools. Therefore, we say that Ukrainian school leavers of grade 4, like primary school leavers, if we can say so, are able to prove their English level with A1 level according to CFR, and A1 Movers is the perfect assessment tool for that. Can I have the next slide, please, Tanya? So what we have prepared is, as Tanya mentioned, material adaptation, and we are very proud of having a Cambridge University Press title in Ukrainian schools, with thousands of students using the book. I'm sure everybody, all the teachers know Herbert as an author of the material. We work jointly with British Council and the Ministry of Education on developing teachers professionally, and we've created a separate platform which unites our resources and help teachers find out more about teaching primary. And we've also launched the update to this platform with Meet Secondary information. And we are introducing assessment standards throughout the whole new Ukrainian school. So if you can have the next slide. As the result of the close cooperation, we are very happy and very proud to say that all the activity books for grade 4 of Quick Minds have a special personalized discount code for taking A1 Movers. When you open the book, you would see a letter addressed to parents and teachers with the QR code, which would lead them to a special dedicated landing page with more information in Ukrainian, so that you can also transfer this to parents about YLE movers, and with the information where you can apply the discount code for taking A1 movers. So if you're a teacher and you want your students to get tested with A1 movers qualification at the end of the academic year, please check their Quick Minds activity books, search or just delete these kind of lottery colored fabric, and note the discount code and make sure you register them for their first international qualification. I'm sure your students will enjoy the experience of taking A1 movers, and you would see their high results with great achievements further. So the next slide, please. We have it there. Okay, so the next slide is a bit of the housekeeping. So we've shared with you our updates on primary. We'll keep on updating you with our news on and upper secondary throughout the conference. So this is the agenda for today, and we are almost keeping the time. One more news, Tanya.
Sorry?
Yeah, I think we need to tell about the the Cambridge Teacher 2021 thing. Will we do so?
Yes, yes. So we decided to start this campaign, and we started it with telling you all about the conference. And during the conference, you can still take part in the prize draw that will be there at the end. I would really appreciate seeing some pictures from this conference. We know that it's always better to have pictures from real conference with the speaker next to the banner and next to the book exhibition. But still, we would like to see you, and we will be really happy to find your pictures with a hashtag Cambridge Teacher 2021 on the social media, because you know, it's always nice to see the results of your work, and it's always nice to see teachers having fun at the conferences and learning something new and something important for them. And of course, there will be a prize draw. We will use the random.org website to find the winners out of those who post pictures using this hashtag. Don't forget the hashtag. It's important because that's how we will find you. And make you take part in this prize draw. All right.
Okay. Just to remind, we will have 3 prizes.
Yes.
And the last but not the least piece of information, we will be sharing the certificate of attendance with you. Please expect your certificate to reach your mailboxes next week. So we won't be able to do this straight away after the session. We're also very grateful for the fact that there are hundreds of students joining us today. But please be patient and look for your certificates of participation next week in your mailboxes. I guess that's it. I guess that's high time we introduced her.
Yes. Okay.
If Herbert actually needs introduction.
Yeah, every time I think about it, okay, I'm going to introduce Herbert, Professor Herbert Puchta. I don't know, is there anything new to say? Is there anything that people don't know to say, right? Because Herbert is the author of Quick Minds. Herbert Puchta is the author of Think, the beloved course of many teachers as well, co-author of Empower, and loads of handbooks for teachers, for their teacher development. Personally, I got acquainted with Herbert, I think 6 years ago, when I wasn't even an English teacher, and he was the one who inspired me to start teaching. Yeah, I just came to look at the event, how it was organized. And I fell in love with all the books. I fell in love with Herbert Puchta's approach to teaching English. And so Herbert Puchta, professor in pedagogy, professor in teaching English as the second language, and ex-president of ITEFL, speaker at many conferences, author of various materials for Cambridge University Press, and our favorite teacher of Ukrainian teachers who work with primary students. Giving the floor to you, and happy to see your presentation and your talk today.
Well, thank you so much, Tatiana. I almost blushed when you said all these wonderful things about me. Some of them are true. and I'm very, very happy to be with Darina and Tatiana, and with you all. I'm delighted to meet so many of you in cyberspace. And I'd like to thank Darina and Tatiana for the invitation to give a talk at today's conference. I think I need to share my screen now. Here we go. That's the wrong one. Again. No. I'm sorry about this. We were joking initially that today everything seems to be running so smoothly, and now I seem to be messing it up.
Well, that's technology.
Yes, we can always find an excuse. Can you see the slide, Tatiana?
Yes.
Okay, okay, lovely. So here we go. I'm going to be talking about how to make language memorable for our primary students. And of course, this is connected to how we need to teach and facilitate the retention of grammar and vocabulary. When we say grammar and vocabulary, there is, of course, more and more awareness these days that the two really hang together a lot. We're talking about lexico-grammatical chunks very often these days. It seems that if we can help our learners retain in their long-term memory grammar, and if we do that in the right way, then vocabulary somehow sticks to their long-term memory too, and vice versa. So let's have a quick look at the table of contents, so to speak. I'm briefly going to remind ourselves, and I don't think I need to remind you, that learning is not just about the brain. I will be talking about the brain quite a lot today, but learning is, of course, about emotions too. And recent findings in neurobiology confirm that when we're talking about emotions and the brain, emotions and thinking, then there are a lot of connections between these two, what used to be thought of as poles or contrasts in the past. So actually, the more emotionally engaged our students are, of course, not only emotionally engaged, also cognitively and behaviorally, but the more, you know, our students enjoy what they're doing, the better, of course, also for their learning. I'm going to share with you 3 key findings about memory and the human brain. 3 key findings that I think, and this is my thesis in this talk, should influence how we work with our students, because we all want to be successful as teachers, don't we? And in order to be successful as teachers, we need happy students. We need students who love what we want them to do in our lessons. We want happy parents, and happy parents, of course, we will get if our students do not only like what we're doing with them in our lessons. Parents are more and more becoming aware also of how important it is to be successful. And when we are talking like English as a foreign language, these days we're talking about comparable results. We're talking international exams. Darina has mentioned that. So the more we can help them to retain language in their long-term memory, the happier, of course, the parents will be. So we'll be talking about some practical implications, and also a few thoughts on how we can help learners to prepare for tests. I'm only today talking about language, so vocabulary and grammar. But I'm pretty sure that you will find some of these insights useful for preparing tests in general, and not just vocabulary and grammar tests. We will have time towards the end for some questions, and hopefully I will be able to answer at least a few of them. Here we go. As I've said, you know, we want happy learners, not just because that makes our lives as teachers easier. This is a pretty new book on emotions, learning, and the brain, and I'd just like you to have a look at this quotation. The basic premise is that when learning and knowledge are relatively devoid of emotion, when people learn things by rote without internally driven motivation, and without a sense of interest or real world relevance, then it's likely that they won't be able to use what they learn efficiently in the real world. So we need to unpack this a little bit, I believe. There's a lot in this quotation. First of all, it stresses the need to help our learners be emotionally engaged. Okay, we know it. We know it from our personal experiences as learners also. That there have been times, I'm sure we all remember those times, when we had to rote learn and study. And of course, I mean, we all became teachers and we've been successful as learners. But rote learning is not always fun. I'm not saying that rote learning is completely useless. It's not. Certain things we need to sit down and study. But the more we can combine learning and knowledge with emotions, the more we develop an interest, the more we want to have, you know, using a modern term, ownership over the language we are learning. And if we manage to help our students to develop this ownership, then they will also begin to understand that what they are learning is of relevance to their future lives and is of relevance to what they need to do in the real world, okay? And that's when it'll kick. That's when our learners will actually be more prepared to learn also autonomously. And that is obviously something that cannot easily be achieved from the very beginning in a primary class. But that's something that we need to see as a long-term goal, of course. What do we know about memory? As I said, I'm going to share 3 key insights into the human memory. The first one is that memory is about meaning making, okay? We do not remember so well isolated bits and pieces of information that don't mean much for us. We are interested in stories. We are interested in, especially children, their brains, and not only children's brains, also adults' brains are, as Lisa Kron says, wired for story. Young people and people in general are curious. Let's listen to this quotation. Lisa Kron says, because being curious is necessary for survival. Our brain's #1 interest is securing our survival. Okay, and being curious helps to survive. I mean, when you are in a busy street in Kiev and you're not interested in what's happening around you, then this might be very dangerous. People in Stone Age suddenly heard something, a rustling in the bushes. And of course, they immediately became curious and alert and needed to find out what that was. It could be a dangerous animal. Okay, so nature encourages this kind of curiosity because initially it secured our survival. And what better way to encourage curiosity, Lisa Kron says, than to make you feel good. So we're bringing this aspect of emotions back into the picture here. This is why once our curiosity is roused as a reader, as a learner, as a listener to a story, as a viewer of a video, as a viewer of a movie later on, you have an emotional vested interest in finding out what happens next. So it's finding out what happens next, which is so important for meaning making. Our brain is a prediction machine. Steven Pinker says, we constantly predict what's going to happen next. And we do when we read a story or when we listen to a story. And bingo, you feel that delicious sense of urgency. Hello, dopamine, Lisa Kron says, when dopamine gets released in our neurology, I'll be talking about this in a second, that all stories instantly ignite. And here we are in the middle of the young learner's classroom, of course. We know that when we tell them a story, we know when they watch a video, they are eager to find out what happens and what happens next. And we can see it from the looks on their faces, how emotionally and cognitively engaged they are when they are involved in this prediction and anticipating kind of activity. So that's the first one, meaning making. The second one that we know about memory is that it's actually not what you see here. Some people believe that our memory, our brain is some kind of a container, some kind of a container with lots and lots and lots of little drawers. And learning a language successfully is making sure that language, like for example, in our case, vocabulary and grammar, gets excuse me, stored in these little boxes up there, not only stored in our boxes, but later we also know how to retrieve the language that we need to recall. So we know how to find those little drawers so we can use the language that we have stored actively. Well, as I've already said, there is very, very clear evidence from brain science that this is not a good metaphor for what happens in the brain. When our students learn, we need to know, even if it's just one new word, connections get formed between neurons in the brain. So it's not about little boxes, it's not about little drawers, it's all about a living, growing system of neuronal connections or neuronal networks. And when students are learning what happens in their brains, and I'll show you an interesting photo in a second, is that new circuits between nerve cells, between neurons, are created with the help of what is called synapses, as you know. And this essentially remaps or rewires the brain. So number one, it's all about meaning making. Number two, it's all about connections. And let's just look at the photo first before I go any further. So what we have is in our students' cortex, the skin over their brain, we have these neuronal networks. And as they're growing older and as they're learning more and more, these neuronal networks are getting denser. I thought I had a photo of this, but unfortunately I haven't put it in. You can almost imagine like the roots of a plant. That's what these neuronal networks look like. And the fascinating thing is that emotions play a significant role in the development of these roots, these neuronal networks. James Zal, a very good friend of mine, we were actually working on a book together, and unfortunately he passed away 3 years ago. A neuro scientist. He explains in one of his books that what makes these neuronal networks grow, it's almost like the fertilizers that make the growth in our cortex, where the neuronal networks grow. So these fertilizers are so-called neurotransmitters: adrenaline, serotonin, and dopamine. Not only, there are also others. And James Zal says that these are the chemicals of emotion. So when our students are engaged, are positively engaged, then these chemicals like adrenaline, serotonin, and dopamine get released, and they act by modifying synapses. So they create synapses, and the networks in our brain become denser and denser. Modification of synapses, James Zal says, is the very root of learning. Third point, what do we know about memory? It's about reconstruction, okay? So there is evidence that our long-term memory, LTM, okay, doesn't just store information as compact experiences like a video recording, okay? But rather in two different ways. As individual details that somehow hang together through these neuronal networks. And we also store in our mind what is called the story script that helps us to recreate a memory. So when we are trying to remember something, we don't normally see immediately a full video as a compact experience of what happened. We remember bits, and remembering those bits bring back memories of other bits. And then we think, yeah, what did we do then? Yeah, that happened. Oh, I remember now. So we somehow reconstruct what that experience was all about, okay? So the building blocks of memory are the details and an assembly manual or script. And the more complete the script and the more the details are connected, the better for recall. Okay. And again, emotions play a major role in that. And multisensory activation plays a major role in that process too. The more we can manage to help our learners to learn in a multisensory way, especially when they are very young, the more connections are built in their brain and the better they will remember. Okay, so this might be a good visual metaphor for how these things hang together and sort of influence one another. So we have meaning making, and this is one of the stories, you know it well. I guess if you're working with quick minds, it's actually the episode from the Explorers that you find in Unit 1. So I suppose those of you who are currently teaching in the fourth form know the story very well. So we have, for those of you who don't know it, it's a series of episodes that are kind of like self-standing, but it's a story that develops throughout the year. We have Lucy and Ben, the two explorers, and they are faced in a confrontation with two baddies. So Ben and Lucy are the goodies, and Zelda and Horrocks are the baddies. So we have, and that is very important from a psychological point of view, when it comes to stories for children, we have a strong contrast between a strong emotional contrast between good and bad. Lucy and Ben are searching. They are on a search. They are searching for lines that in the end they will put together, and they will find a treasure then. And Horrocks and Zelda know that. They know that the children are looking for this treasure. They are looking for those lines, and they want to get the treasure from the children. They want to steal the treasure, basically. So what we have is in this first episode, Lucy and Ben, together with their dog Buster, they're sitting down here, they're having a little picnic, and suddenly, as you can maybe not see so well here, there's a snake, and the snake bites Buster, so they have a problem, okay? So Ben suggests, let's take Buster to the village. They go to the village, and they ask this lady there, and Lucy says, "Excuse me, our dog needs help. Where can we go?" And the woman says, "Go to the old man. He lives over there." They're talking to the old man. They have Buster on a little kind of stretcher here, as you can see. And the man says, go to the mountain. There's a tree with a golden apple. Give the apple to your dog. That's a frequent topos in stories, isn't it? That there's some kind of mystery, something magic, like a golden apple here. And they have to search for the golden apple and give it to the dog, so the dog gets healed again. As they're moving up into the mountain, they can see that there is Horrocks, okay? Horrocks says to Zelda, quick, let's get that apple. In fact, when you look at picture 3, you saw that there's Horrocks kind of like hiding in the right-hand corner, so he can overhear the conversation, and him and Zelda are ahead of the children. They're trying to get the golden apple, okay? And what happens is that Horrocks climbs the tree where he can see the apple, and then he's too full of himself, so to speak. So he slips and he falls off the tree, out of the tree, and then the children have the apple. And at the same time, there is this little spring at the foot of the tree. And as they're picking up the apple that has landed in this little well, in this water pool, Ben finds actually the next line for the rhyme, okay? He says, Lucy, look, there's the line of the rhyme, and we can see the line of the rhyme behind the picture in the frame. Of course, this line doesn't make sense. It only makes sense once they have found all the lines of the little poem that in the end, in the last episode, they will, excuse me, put together, and then they will find the treasure, okay? So the children have the apple, they've given it to the dog, and you can see it's a happy dog again, right? So here's a story. And we have a number of what I would call survival elements in the story, okay? Things that the brain is interested in. So a story speaks to us if and when we can find, or our subconscious mind, our brain, can find in the story things that are important for our lives, okay? So think of a child, think of their stage of development. What do you think? I'd like to ask you, I need to open the chat box now. I'd like to ask you to type into the chat box what kind of survival elements, quote unquote, there are in this story. What the child's brain might actually find in the story that is interesting to the brain, why it might engage the learners. Can you just type your answers into the chat box, please? I'll give you a minute or two. How to be smart with the baddies. And somebody is saying extraordinary. What to do in the case when you meet the snake? Yes, save the dog, support, friendship, cooperation, to be curious, absolutely. How to win against the bad people? Okay. Yes, it teaches about core skills, values, finding a solution, looking for help, looking for support, how to ask someone for help. Absolutely. Friendship. Those are all extremely valuable points. Thank you. Also, how not to give up. Absolutely. So goodness, friendship, yes. Appreciate values. Thank you. Life skills. And one important life skill, as somebody said here, is when you are in trouble and you can't solve something on your own, try and find somebody who might be able to help you. Ask for help, as a colleague is just saying now, okay? And to be brave also, okay? Teamwork, helping together, pair work, etc., etc., etc. So those are the elements in a story that help to engage children emotionally. And if those elements are there, then it's much easier, actually, because of the fact that our brain searches for meaning. It's much easier for our learners to remember what we have in a story, okay? Now, when we then do a little comprehension task, this is actually the next page. It's actually on the, let me go back for a second. You can see it here on the screen, number 2. So they're just, you know, they've read the story. Now they're going, Ben and Lucy take Buster or a snake to the village. Well, of course it's Buster. The golden apple is on the mountain, in the village, on the mountain. The golden apple is for Buster Lucy. So that helps to make sure the children understand the story. It's also like a safety net for some children who maybe need more support, who haven't understood the story yet so well, helps them with comprehension. But, and this is important, this is not enough if we want to make sure that our children remember language really well. If we want them to remember language in the long-term memory, we need to go beyond that a little bit. This is what I wanted to show you. I put it in the wrong place in my presentation. Forgive me. Let's just have a quick look at that. I don't know if you can see that well, but these are 4 strips, tiny strips of neocortex, the skin over the brain, where the neuronal networks grow. And that's different stages in a child's development. The first one is at the age of 3 months, 6 months is the next, 18 months or 15 months, sorry, and 24 months. And we can see, just as a recap of what I said previously, I hope you agree with me that these look like roots almost, okay? So we can see the dark dots, those are the neurons. And through the synapses, what happens is that we create, or our brain creates, those neuronal networks. So we said we need 3 things: creating connections. Oops. Let me just click here. Then we do that, of course, when you think of creating connections. Then, of course, we also need to help our learners to make connections, personal connections, between the language they are learning and their own lives, their own realities. So this is obviously a page, a grammar introductory page. So we have sentences like, in winter, it's often very cold here. You know what that is like, don't you? I always have lots of blankets on my bed in winter, but in summer, I sometimes sleep with no blanket, okay? In my country, the temperature is always between 25 and 32 degrees. So I never have a blanket on my bed. I never sleep on a pillow, but I love the cushions in my room. Okay, etc., etc., etc. So we have 2 kids, one probably from Ukraine, I guess, and the other one from a different country, somewhere, a place where it's basically warm or hot throughout the year. The temperature in my country, it says, is always between 25 and 32 degrees. So with your help, learners read these bits and pieces, and then they match them. Is it Lestari or is it Matvi? I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. We get them to listen to the grammar here. We explain to them, usually, often, rarely, sometimes, and then they fill in, they play with the help of the teacher. First, of course, they play this true or false game, where they say, for example, Matvi rarely feeds the dog, and they need to check in the sentences up there, and then it's false, he often, etc., etc., etc. So you know what this is like. This is not yet about creating personal connections, because this is about learning about two children. It's about reconstructing the reality they have read about here. And it's doing a bit of guesswork, but they're not expressing something about themselves yet. While here, in the lower part of the next page, when you have number 3, talk to a friend, say sentences that are true for you, then ask your friend. So, for example, a child could say, I never eat cheese. How often do you eat cheese? Etc., etc., etc. Then what happens is that they are now using the language that they've learned, that they came across in a different context first, learning about those two children. Now they're using the language, like in this case, those frequency adverbs, usually, often, sometimes, and rarely also, they're using them as themselves, talking about their own reality, about their own life experience, about their own lives. So that is key when it comes to making connections. We need stories, but we also need real world in terms of helping our learners to talk about themselves, okay? And this goes further in Quick Minds. I'm not going into detail here for time reasons, but you can see this is about looking after yourself. They read little chunks of language like use a new toothbrush, leave food outside, wash your hands often, eat 5 small meals a day, go out with wet hair, etc., etc., etc. And then they choose the correct pictures, and they can, of course, decide together with the teacher which of these things are good and which are not good. Going out with wet hair can be good in the summer when it's warm, but of course, if you do it in the winter, it's a problem. So looking after yourself, again, using the language to make meaning in connection with real world experiences. And then some tips, some health tips or tips for good looking. In this case, do you want to have a great smile? Then look after your teeth, okay? And here are the tips. Don't eat a lot of sugary food. Don't use an old toothbrush, etc., etc. And again, answer the question. So we're bringing in the language, the grammar we introduced previously, and we get them to ask and answer questions in class before they create an infographic. The next item, the first one, is making these connections and making meaning. The next one is scaffolding reconstruction. And that's where we are going beyond what we have seen so far. So, as I said, when you remember previously, when we have this comprehension task after story, for example, they're very important because they have children, they consolidate their understanding of the story. But now we want to go further. We want to go into the reconstruction of language. We want them to remember actively in their long-term memory the language they have learned in the story. And here we have different techniques. I'm going to show you 3 that I find very, very useful with young learners. So I've just written up the same sentences here. Horrocks climbs up the tree to get the apple. Ben finds the lion in the water. Ben and Lucy take Buster to a village. The golden apple is for Buster. The golden apple is on the mountain. So they need to look at the sentences, and then they need to decide, of course, which one is the first, which is the second, which is the third, etc., etc., etc. Okay, you can, if you have a very good class, make this a little bit more demanding and put a bit more language in when you do this. The next one, and this is an activity I love. I think I first learned it from my colleague and co-author on a book about grammar, Scott Thornbury. Oops, sorry, I went a bit too far. It's a technique that I call the chunks generator. Could you just have a look at this for a moment? I need to, oops, I'm sorry, I need to get my chat out of the way here because it's blocking my vision. Okay. Could you please just have a look here and sorry about this. And let's go back. So here's the chunks generator, okay? So you all know what gapped sentences are all about, okay? You have a gap, and then students need to fill the gap in a sentence. And that's all fine and fair enough. Only a task like this, which is similar like gap sentence, but it's a lot more challenging because there is no gap there. So the children need to do a lot more active thinking here. You see the point? So could you just help me with the first one, please, and type the correct sentence in the box there, in the chat box. Thank you, Olga, for saying it's very interesting. What is the correct first sentence? Exactly. Excuse me, our dog needs help. And the second one, go to the old man. He lives over there. Absolutely. So you see what happens. It's far less recognition that's needed from the child here, and a lot more reconstruction. They are recreating the chunks, like, for example, over there. He lives over there. And by doing so, because they're cognitively extremely engaged here, they will remember the chunks better. Okay. And one last one. So I've shown you 2. These are sentence builders. Obviously it's clear they take one bit from each box and create a sentence. Can you just create one correct sentence that ties in with the story, please? Giving you a bit of time. An old man helps them. Yes, absolutely. Or they look for a golden apple. There's a tree is not correct because there's no tree in box number 2. Okay, so there's what's next? There's a snake. Doesn't work because you need to take one from each box. You see, one item from the first box. Yes, there's a problem, and then you need to go on with There's a problem with a snake, absolutely. So one item from box 1, one item from box 2, and one item from box 3. Again, students, yes, thank you. Students need to think really hard in order to be able to do that. So those tasks are much more helpful in terms of training them to reconstruct. Now, very briefly, I said I'm going to give you some tips about how to help students to prepare for exams. And there's been a fascinating study done by John Dunlowski and his team in 2013. This is the study Improving Students' Learning with Effective Learning Techniques, Promising Directions from Cognitive and Educational Psychology. Now, what these people did, and it's a fascinating study, they looked at, I think, 700 or 800 research projects, trying to find out more about the students' most effective learning or studying techniques. And they kind of compared all these findings and filtered out the two most efficient study strategies, no matter whether we are talking university students. The technique was actually done with university students, but it's also extremely helpful and meaningful with primary children. And I'm going to show you this. I've done a bit of classroom research myself to show whether this works for primary children, and I can recommend it highly. Simple, but very, very useful. So when you look at these 4 study techniques, highlighting, you know what I mean, taking a pink or yellow or green highlighter and underlining, let's say we have a list of words, underlining the words that I find, highlighting the words that I need to remember, or underlining them, or going through a text and underlining or highlighting there. That's one. Practice testing, I think you know what I mean, doing practice tests. Rereading, sitting in front of the same list of words, reading and rereading and rereading and rereading it. Or distributed practice. Distributed practice is the opposite of distributed practice would be cramming. Cramming is when a student starts learning 3 days before a test and tries to cram into their brain as much as possible in a short period of time, sometimes the night before the exam. Distributed practice is starting to learn early enough and spreading out over several days, over more days, what you need to learn. So here's my question for you. 2 of these 4 techniques, 4 strategies, are very high in efficacy. In other words, 2 of them have been proven, scientifically proven, to be extremely powerful. And the other 2 are hopeless. Can I ask you to type into the chat box which you think? So your guesses, which 2 are the very, very, very powerful? Which 2 are high in efficacy? Highlighting, underlining, tests and distributed practice. Lilia says practice testing, highlighting 1 and 4, highlighting and distributed practice, practice testing, practice testing, practice test, distributed practice 2 and 3. Okay. Lovely. Thanks very much. I mean, several of you got it absolutely right. These are the 2. Rereading has very low utility. The reading and reading and reading and reading the same list or the same text or what have you, often it gives the impression that a child or later a teenager is actually studying, but in fact, it has very little efficacy in terms of long-term memory retention. Highlighting, underlining, ditto. Highlighting and underlining actually messes up a page or a list and makes it more difficult to remember things, it seems. Okay, so it's the messiness. High utility has been shown students get when they do lots of practice testing. That is quite an amazing finding, actually. Danilowski, performance on a final test was substantially greater after continued testing. So there the efficacy was 80% than after continued study. And study would be rereading, underlining, highlighting, okay? 36%, okay? Yeah, that's what I thought too. Julia is saying highlighting may occur to be somewhat helpful for visual learners in some particular cases. That's a thought I had too. It's not supported by the findings in these 800 studies, actually. So it is actually really testing, practice testing, and distributed practice, okay? So how often? Well, how often should they do a practice test? Concerning dosage, they say the simplest conclusion is the better. The simplest conclusion is that more is better. So actually, the suggestion is, Yelizaveta is asking, testing, do you mean like writing tests after every unit learned? For example, yes. Putting a test together for children and giving them the test as a practice test, not giving them marks, not grading them based on that, but giving them a test where they can see how much they remember already. Then, a few days later, you give them the same test again, and we'll see how much they retain now. And then again, and then maybe, yes, formative assessment. And then maybe giving them the test again. This is assessment for learning. And this is what helps students enormously. And if you now mix this, the practice testing with distributed testing, and the kind of, when it comes to testing language, vocabulary, grammar, the kind of activities I've shown you previously, the chunks generator, the sentence building task, and for example, also the sequencer. You do activities like that where students have to think, then that helps them enormously. That's what they say. We observed significantly greater final performance when students engaged in cued recall practice until target items were recalled 4 or 5 times versus only once. So the practice test needs to be done several times. And as Juliana is saying now, you can see their progress, but even more importantly, they can see their own progress, okay? So I'm coming to the end of this. This is the so-called generation effect. The more challenging these tasks are, the better for the students, okay? So when they're very young, we need hands-on learning experiences. When they're getting older, when we want to help them to prepare for exam, they need minds-on learning experiences, experiences that challenge them, where they need to think. And the more they need to think, the better for the retention in their long-term memory. I am just skipping a few slides here. This is a paper, a white paper I have written for Cambridge University Press. I'm sure Darina or Tetiana can can send you the link. It is freely available. You can, download it from the Cambridge website. It's about what is called executive skills, or I can't get the thing out of the way here. Chat box. I can't see my own slides really. So it's about executive skills. And if you're interested, I'm also writing something there in this paper. It's a 24-page paper on practice testing. So this is the content we've been dealing with: learning and emotions, 3 key findings about memory, practical implications for our primary class, and what we can do to help them prepare for tests. And now we have a bit of time for questions and answers. Back to my 2 colleagues.
And we are back as well. Thank you very much, Herbert. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you, Darina. Thank you.
I was looking through the chats, made notes, and the lovely comments. The one I liked the best was that students know how to buy apples properly after Quick Minds 3.
Nice.
We have lots of thank you coming in to the chat.
Lovely.
And few questions in the Q&A. I'll take one.
Okay. Let me have a look.
The topic is closely connected with ACC learning, social, emotional, and ethical learning introduced at the 5th National EdCamp Conference in Ukraine. This program has been launched in Ukraine. You have great ideas. So I think it's not a question, more like a compliment.
Yeah, Oksana, many thanks for your comment. Obviously, I don't know anything about the National EdCamp conference in Ukraine, but I totally agree with you that the focus we need to put on both social, emotional, and ethical kind of like values. Learning, of course, is important for us and the children we teach. The fascinating thing about being a language teacher, about being a teacher in general, but being a language teacher in particular, and being a language teacher of children for me, is that it's not just the present progressive or even skills work or international exams and all those things that are so important that we need to have in our focus. Is also the child, the whole child. It's the development of the child. So we're educators as much as we are language developers, and I think this is the wonderful thing.
Thank you. And one more is the housekeeping question. Will we have a certificate for each webinar today? No, you will have a single certificate for all the 3 sessions. So stay with us further. Okay, we don't have questions in the Q&A, but we have hundreds of thank you coming in the chat box. And I think we are very punctual today, doing everything on time.
Lovely.
Thank you very much, Herbert, for finding time in your very busy schedule and spending it with Ukrainian teachers.
My pleasure.
A lot, and looking forward to welcoming you in Ukraine. Hopefully one day we will be back to our face-to-face sessions. We are breaking for 5 minutes. Please just don't go away. Just stay with us here. We'll mute ourselves, go grab some coffee, and be ready for the next session with Olga Modilis.
There's just one question. I think Tatiana is asking about the link. I apologize for not putting the link in. You can find it easily among the other white papers. And I guess you will follow up and can send this link.
Yeah. We made a note on the study. So
okay, lovely. Thank you so much. So let me just thank the two of you most warmly, and everybody there in front of your screens. Thank you so much for your active participation. And I wish you all the very best. Enjoy teaching, because that's extremely important. Have a good sense of humor. And as Darina was saying, I so hope too that our next meeting will be face-to-face, and I'll be on a stage somewhere in Ukraine in front of you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Herbert.
Bye-bye, Herbert. Bye.
Pleasure.
Okay, and we have a break for 3 minutes now until 12:20, right? So grasp your coffee. That's a very tiny coffee break.
Okay, see you in 2 minutes.